Thanks for joining us for another episode of Boom and Bust. I'm your host, Tony Clement. I'm here at the News Forum where all voices matter. Another in our series of interviews with CPC leadership candidates. Boom and Bust is pleased to welcome Roman Baber. He's a former Ontario MPP. He's also a lawyer by profession and lives in Toronto. Welcome to the program, Roman.
Good to be with you, Tony.
So I'll ask the generic question. Obviously, you can tell our viewers why you're running for leader of the Conservative Party.
Look, I'm running to restore Canada's democracy, opportunity, and trust in government. I came to Canada when I was 15. We didn't have a cent to our name, but I've been very blessed with everything our country has to offer. And I stood up for Canadians when it wasn't popular in early January 2021. I opposed my own government against the onerous public health restrictions at the time that have proven to be so devastating, namely the lockdowns. And I'll continue to defend Canadians and still restore rights to every single Canadian. I've also been blessed with every opportunity, as I said, and I don't want to see Canadian opportunity erode. And I believe that I'm in a unique position to unite the Conservative Party and bring authenticity to lead it to victory.
And go through, obviously, you've just mentioned some aspects of why you're running, but why don't you go through some of the themes of your campaign?
Absolutely. Look, I believe that Canada's democracy is being eroded. And I have a unique perspective on democracy. I was born in the former Soviet Union, wouldn't leave until I was almost 9. And so I know how precious and how fragile our democracy is. We're still treating 15% of Canadians like second-class citizens. We see government overreach and censorship without any justification, primarily designed to silence its opponents and critics. It's unthinkable that government would decide what we cannot see online. So I would propose to repeal all federal censorship legislation, defend regulated professionals and their ability to speak freely without reprisal, restore parliamentary democracy by decentralizing power away from the PMO, having a serious conversation with social media companies not to infringe on our ability to speak, and defund and free media from any independence on government to assure we have free speech in government to defend our democracy.
And let's drill down a little bit more because you have been, as you have been on this program already, highly critical of the pandemic management by various governments. So can you tell our audience a little bit about how you would like to do things differently or would have done things differently in the past?
Well, first of all, you had to entertain opinion, and there was essentially no opinion allowed during the COVID-19 pandemic, which, in my view, led to disastrous consequences. We know, according to Statistics Canada, that the access deaths under age 65 are considerably greater from other causes other than COVID. We know that statistically, the illness is regretfully very dangerous to folks that are closer to end of life. More than 80% of those that passed away are in long-term care homes. But instead of focusing protection on vulnerable and building healthcare capacity, we locked down 37 million Canadians with disastrous consequences. We have more than 800,000 surgeries missed. We now saw an article just a couple of days ago. We have a record death from surgeries delayed in Ontario. We missed more than 1 million cancer screenings in Ontario alone during the first year of the pandemic. We created a mental health catastrophe that is still gripping our nation, particularly our children. We convinced little children that if they play with another child in close proximity, that someone might die. What I propose is that we use fair data, allow for dissenting opinions, instead of being subjected to being gagged by cancel culture that led to, I believe, one of the greatest disasters in Canadian public policy.
You also, obviously, whenever you're running for something like this, you have to concern yourself with the economy. So I do want to spend a chunk of time on that. We're almost at commercial break now. We've got about 30 seconds left, but why don't you start with some of your economic platform, and we'll return to it after the break.
Absolutely. I have a philosophical approach to the economy, and that is to basically let people work, let Canadians work, something they already love to do, something that our government doesn't like too much.
All right. Well, we're going to take a brief break. We have as our guest Roman Baber. He is a leadership candidate for the Conservative Party of Canada leadership, which the announcement will be made on September 10th. So it's coming up fast. Roman, thanks for joining us. We'll be back with you after this break. Please stay with us. We'll be right back. Roman, we were talking just before the break, just started to get into it about some of your economic policy. Obviously, one of the things that has really spiraled out of control during and after the pandemic is national debt and deficits by governments. Is that one of the things you'd like to tackle?
Absolutely. So, look, the best thing we can do is to actually let Canadians work. And we keep finding ways for them not to work. It could be something as extreme as lockdowns or mandates. We still have hospital workers that are precluded from going into hospitals because of their personal choice, despite the fact that our healthcare system is collapsing. The government is proposing a universal basic income to discourage Canadians from working. I want to do the opposite. I don't think that Canadians want universal basic income. They want to earn an income instead, all this dependency and state intervention. I propose that the best thing we can do to let Canadians work is to free up our natural resources sector. I believe that Canada's natural resources are a blessing, and I'm not going to let oil and gas be cancelled. And it's good for our strategic interest and our economic bottom line. And it's also good for the planet because Canadians can derive energy cleaner and safer than any other nation in the world. And that's the only way that we're going to get out of the fiscal mess that the Liberals are going to leave us in. It's not enough to just stop printing and cut and save our way out of it. We owe $1.3 trillion with $2 billion of interest a month. We need a massive economic expansion to grow out of this. And I propose to do that by turning Canada into the natural resources superpower that we ought to be. Just to finish off on that, I also think that we should end Canadian interdependency, interprovincial dependency, which is why I propose to end equalization payments and give all monies we spent per year on equalization. We tax Canadians $21 billion to redistribute to have no provinces. I would propose to give that back by way of a tax cut. We're the Conservative Party. We should not be afraid to talk about tax cuts. And finally, I propose to release and free all these very challenging federally regulated industries like telecom, banking, aviation to encourage more competition, help the consumer. It's good for the economy. It's good for jobs, and will help Canadians work.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought up Canadians' tax load because that's another thing that has obviously increased markedly during the pandemic. So talk a little bit about Canadian taxes and your thoughts on that.
We have, I believe, the national tax holiday is in the middle of June, when various organizations estimate that Canadians have paid all of their share of tax for the year, which is essentially half of their pay. I actually think it's considerably greater if you factor in the embedded taxes passed on to consumers. Look, first of all, the tax I will tackle first is the carbon tax. And I think that we should not be afraid to talk about the environment. This is an Achilles heel for the Conservatives. Tony, I've built a reputation for not being afraid to say what I believe, and I'll do the same with the environment. I don't believe that taxing Sally $10 at the gas pump is going, every time she fills up, is going to change the global climate. I don't think that anyone really believes that anymore. Taxing you $10 whenever you go to the gas station and paying that to the government will not affect the global climate, in my view. And I think that a lot of Canadians agree with me. And so we should not be afraid to say it. I'm going to cut the carbon tax immediately. I'll also look at the fuel tax. I also think we could probably use a general income tax to help us with affordability. And I'm going to pay it by proposing to end equalization and offering a broad-based tax cut to every Canadian taxpayer by increasing their personal amount, the personal exemption amount that's exempt from $14,000 to $20,800 a year per taxpayer. Nothing to sneeze at. But again, we should not be afraid to have a conversation about cutting taxes.
Another issue affecting Canadians right now is inflation. It's at a 40-year high, at record levels. How do you react to that, and what's your plan for Canadians?
So first of all, it's we need to be clear about what's causing all this inflation. It's not just the fact that we printed and borrowed $500 billion. That certainly didn't help. But the main cause of inflation is the shortage of supply. We stopped the global supply chain at its tracks at least 3 times. It's lockdowns that caused this. And now that we reopen the economy, supply is simply not catching up to demand. My Jeep broke down a couple of months ago. I left it at the dealership for a month because the dealership didn't have parts. We're seeing, children's medicine this morning is out on shelves. We're short on food. We're short on natural resources. And until we give the market certainty that we're never locking down again, and until we end this public health exercise where government extricates itself out of our lives and tells Canadians that this is behind you, you can return to work and feel better and be productive again, supply is not going to catch up on demand, and this inflation is not going to stop. If I may, very quickly, the two key items are the price of food and the price of gas.
Right. We're just going to jump to a commercial, Roman. We'll be right back with you. Please stay with us. And we're back here at Boom and Bust. I'm your host, Tony Clement, here with Conservative Party leadership candidate Roman Baber. Roman, you were talking before the break about natural resources and getting those to market, helping our economy. It must have been particularly galling with the Russian invasion of Ukraine and now the energy crisis in Europe that we're still trying to talk our way into our energy issues. And tell us a little bit about your reaction there and what the Trudeau government has or hasn't done.
I think to give Canadian consumers a break at the pump, generally have some sort of dent in global oil prices and help our country long term, we have to, at the very least, start telegraphing to the market that we're serious about developing our natural resources. But like I said to you, I think we're blessed with energy and precious metals and minerals that are currently in demand around the world. And I see no reason to continue to shut down Canadian energy or mining. And so what I would propose is to, first of all, repeal the anti-pipelines bill, Bill 90, Bill 69. If anyone's passionate about the environment, that they should rather transport energy by pipeline rather than by train. It's better for the environment and it's certainly safer for human life. I propose that we rethink, legislate, and negotiate the construction of all three major pipelines, and time to speak to our friends in the US again about Excel. Americans are a lot angrier about gas prices than Canadians. I think that we need to legislate and clarify the duty to consult, something that will get a lot of projects going, rebalance some environmental priorities. I think we also need to look at refinery. I don't see why we're shipping a lot of our crude down south for refinery only to get it back. I'd like to talk about that. And finally, I'm very interested in mining. There's an insatiable appetite around the world for precious minerals and metals. Canada is blessed with them. It's good for our northern communities, our remote communities, our Indigenous communities. And that's the only way we're probably going to build a lot of this much needed infrastructure around our country and in the north.
Yeah, on critical minerals, I think you're absolutely right. And obviously, this is an area where if you want to have an environmental sector, if you want to be able to have smartphones, et cetera, you need critical minerals. So China right now has a stranglehold on the supply chain. You talked about supply chain a bit earlier. Is that one of the things that you're concerned about?
Absolutely. So I'm certainly worried about some of the strategic elements around precious metals and minerals. We know that Chinese government or related institutions, wholly subsidiaries of companies with strong ties to China's Communist Party, are purchasing Canadian mines. I think that we need to have a serious discussion at the Bureau of Competition and say a lot of projects that previously do not seem to be in the strategic interest of Canadians maybe need to be designated as such. We already have a test every time there's a foreign acquisition, whether something is in the best interest of Canadians. I would say that given the geopolitical picture, and especially as it comes to natural resources, we need to rethink. That is not to say that we need to stop foreign investment or not work with our partners around the world, but we need to designate, I think, Canadian energy and Canadian mining as a security and a national security interest.
Now, I want to switch gears a little bit. Obviously, there's a lot of division in this country these days. What would you do to create a common sense of purpose again in this country?
Look, first of all, I think that once government extricates itself out of the pandemic response, things are going to get a lot better. People are still afraid. A lot of people are still unsure. People are still walking on eggshells. There's still a lot of regretful, a lot of resentment among Canadians for their own healthcare choices, something that I've opposed immensely because we never forced anyone to do anything against their will. And in my view, COVID's no reason to start. And I made this decision that most Canadians made, but we never forced anyone to do anything against their will. And costing them their job is certainly something that would take away their free will. So, look, there's nothing else to do. We're 85% vaccinated. Uh, National Post even told you a couple of weeks ago that more than half of Canadians had COVID last winter alone in a span of 5 months. We have massive population natural immunity. We need to extricate government out of our daily lives. As soon as it is out, Canadians will breathe easy and will start feeling better towards one another again. I also propose that we unite our country behind the theme of economic opportunity, which we can spark through development of our natural resources. And I think that maybe a decentralized central government, one that is a little bit less arrogant and divisive than the government of Justin Trudeau, will go a long way to restore Canadian comfort and Canadian kindness.
Thanks for joining us again for the final segment of Boom and Bust. I'm your host, Tony Clement, here with Roman Baber. He is a Conservative Party of Canada leadership candidate. Roman, obviously, you're not just running for leader. You want to be the next Prime Minister of Canada. How would you get a winning coalition together for the Conservative Party?
Well, first of all, we've got to welcome back all those voters that feel that the Conservative Party failed them. And I believe the Conservative Party failed to stand up for our children, for our democracy in the last couple of years. And we need to invite all those that either haven't voted or voted for another party to the right to come back and vote Conservative again. Second, we need to welcome diverse voices within the Conservative Party. Social conservatives, for instance. I don't believe that government has a role in how we start or grow our families, but we certainly owe all members parliamentary democracy. And that means we cannot be cutting candidates that don't agree with us on certain views or preventing them from introducing legislation or voting their conscience. It's something that I would never impose on an MP. We have a parliamentary democracy. We need to bring back Western conservatives and Western Canadians who feel that they're left out of the national conversation. I would do that by suggesting that we need to end equalization, that we need to develop our natural resources, look at voter parity, and welcome them into the national conversation in a meaningful fashion. But we also need to grow our base. And in particular, there are two groups that I can think of. One is young people who, a lot of them used to lean to the left, but now many of them feel that they were not left with a personal choice over the last couple of years. And so they don't want to vote left again. And they feel they're worried that they're losing hope for their future and economic opportunity in Canada. And we can offer that hope with a strong message on the economy. And the second, I believe, group that I will uniquely appeal to are new Canadians. New Canadians come to Canada for democracy and opportunity. Those are the themes of my campaign, and those are conservative values. And I think that we should not be ceding them to the Liberals. We know that that will help us immensely in urban areas, in the GTA and Greater Vancouver area. And I think that the Conservative Party needs to make a case to new Canadians, and finally, not to forget Labour. We know that Jagmeet Singh is in trouble with Labour. Many folks who feel that he didn't stand up for their jobs. I think I'm uniquely qualified, given my work in the last couple of years, to stand up for people's jobs, to bring them into the Conservative Party and vote out the Justin Trudeau government.
What's been the biggest surprise to you during this campaign?
Frankly, how raw and important and prevalent the issue of Indigenous affairs is. I speak to Canadians coast to coast, and this is something that many Canadians don't appreciate. And I think, having thought this through and learned a lot more about this, that the best thing we have to learn from our past so we can not repeat the mistakes of our past, but the best thing we can do for reconciliation is to improve the lives of Indigenous Canadians. And that means getting water done. There's no more excuses. We have technologies today that allow us to drop water everywhere without filtration plants or labor. So I'm going to get that done by the end of my first term. But we also need to not be afraid to have a frank conversation about the fact that we're failing many Canadians on reserves, that we don't provide them with basic dignity by assuring health and safety. A lot of reserves are devoid of any law and order. And many Indigenous Canadians, especially Indigenous women, are pleading to us to help them with their well-being and safety. So I think we need to restore law and order on reserve without being afraid of cultural issues or necessarily political hierarchy. I'd be more concerned with protecting Canadians. And also, we need to maybe look at life on reserve. To think that a chief can say that you no longer live in your house, that someone else now will live in your house, I think is un-Canadian. And maybe we need to start thinking about title and home ownership to improve life and communities on reserve.
Roman Baber, it's been great having you on the program. Obviously, we're in the final days of the leadership campaign. I wish you success, whatever that may bring, and hopefully you'll be part of the Conservative dialogue in the future as well. Thanks for joining us today.
Thank you for having me, Tony.
Thank you. I'd like to thank Roman Baber for joining our program today. He's the fourth leadership candidate who has joined us today, and we've had Pierre Poilievre, Jean Charest, and Leslyn Lewis join us. To date, Scott Aitchison has declined to participate, but it's great to have 4 out of the 5 candidates with us, and I hope you've enjoyed our presentations. We'll see what the result is on the 10th of September. But until then, keep watching Boom and Bust and other programs on the News Forum as we digest these issues. Thanks for watching today.